The morning began with the sound of rain drumming on the rooftops and streets of Seoul. Minho, with his quick and steady steps, moved quickly along the wet sidewalks, the umbrella protected by his steady hand while his gaze remained fixed ahead. He was known for his impeccable punctuality, and today would be no different, or so he thought. With a crucial meeting just minutes away, his focus was entirely on work, but fate had other plans. As he crossed one of the narrow alleys of the busy financial district, something caught his attention. To his left, huddled against a dirty wall, was a young woman. Her dark, damp hair framed her pale face, and the thin clothes she wore were completely soaked. She was shivering, her arms wrapped around her knees in a desperate effort to stay warm. This image contrasted violently with the surrounding environment, where people in ties hurried to their offices, indifferent to the suffering of others. Minho didn't know what made him stop. Maybe it was the way her eyes, wide and frightened, stared at him for a brief moment before looking away. There was something about this girl that disconcerted him. Not her pitiful appearance, but a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen her somewhere before. He hesitated for a second, looking at his watch. The meeting. But her fragile body wouldn't leave his mind. Taking a deep breath, he made an unexpected decision, detouring his path to approach the young woman. "Are you okay?" His voice, usually firm and controlled, came out softer than he expected. The woman didn't respond immediately, keeping her gaze fixed on the floor, as if caught up in her own thoughts. Minho took off his jacket, a fine, expensive piece, and offered it to her. She hesitated, her brown eyes finally meeting his. I can't accept it," she murmured, her voice weak and hoarse, probably from hours in the cold. "I'm not asking for permission," Minho replied almost automatically. He didn't know where her insistence came from, but something was driving him to help her. He bent down, gently wrapping her in his jacket, the warmth of the dry fabric quickly contrasting with the damp chill that enveloped her. "How did you end up here?" he asked, trying to probe without seeming invasive. She just shook her head, closing her eyes for a moment as if trying to block out a painful memory. The scene was surreal. He, one of the most powerful men in the city, kneeling on a dirty street, with a stranger wrapped in his jacket. "I don't want to bother you. I don't need help," she murmured, despite her body betraying her with spasms of cold. "Of course you do," Minho replied calmly. He stood up, offering his hand. "Come with me, let's get out of the rain." Once again she hesitated, but something in Minho's tone seemed to reassure her, and she slowly accepted his outstretched hand, standing up with difficulty. Minho was surprised to feel how light she was, almost as if her body had no strength. "What's your name?" he asked as he guided her out of the alley. "Soo-young," she replied, her voice now a little firmer. "And you? Why are you helping me?" "Minho," he replied, with a lightness that even he found strange. "And I don't know. Maybe it's just because I can't imagine anyone going through this." She stared at him for a moment as if trying to decipher him, and in that brief moment, something passed between them, an invisible but palpable connection. As they walked away from the rain, Minho felt that this seemingly casual encounter would change something profound in his life. Soo-young, in turn, felt a mix of relief and uneasiness. She knew that this was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of something much bigger. Minho and Soo-young walked in silence through the busy streets, the discreet glances of the people around them not bothering them. He led her to a small cafe on the corner, a quiet and cozy place, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The bell on the door jingled softly as they entered, and the warmth of the room immediately enveloped them. Minho pulled out a chair for Soo-young, who, still shaking slightly, sat down with a lost look in her eyes. He ordered 2 coffees, and for a moment they both fell silent, the soft hum of conversation around them filling the space between them. "Soo-young," Minho began, trying to find the right words, "I know you don't know me, and this may seem strange, but what happened? How did you end up in that situation?" Soo-young held the hot cup between her hands, staring at the slowly rising steam. For a moment, it seemed like she wouldn't answer, that she would remain trapped in her silence. But then, with a heavy sigh, she began to speak, her voice barely audible at first. "It's a long story," she said, with a sad smile that didn't reach her ears, eyes. "I didn't expect my life to come to this. A few months ago I had a job, a house, friends. But everything fell apart so fast, I don't even know where to start. Minho remained silent, encouraging her to continue with a sympathetic look. He could tell that Soo-young was holding on to something much deeper than a simple life change. There was pain in her eyes, and he knew it went far beyond difficult circumstances. "I was running away," she confessed, her voice breaking a little. "From something, or rather, someone." Minho leaned forward slightly, his attention completely focused on her. Running away from who? Soo-young's grip on the cup tightened, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked around as if checking if anyone was listening, before whispering, "I was involved. With a very dangerous person. At first it didn't seem that way. He was charming, intelligent, knew how to make me feel special, but I soon realized how controlling, manipulative, and violent he was." The revelation hit Minho like a punch to the gut. He tried not to show it, but he felt a wave of worry wash over him. "And you got out of this?" he asked, his voice deeper than he intended. Soo-young nodded slowly. "I managed to escape, but it wasn't easy, and he's still looking for me. I'm afraid that if he finds me—" She didn't finish her sentence, but Minho knew what she meant. The silence that followed was heavy, fraught with tension. Minho thought for a moment, struggling with his own thoughts. He barely knew Soo-young, but the idea of leaving her alone, vulnerable to someone so dangerous, seemed impossible to accept. He'd always been a man of action, someone who made quick decisions, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "As long as you're with me, no one will hurt you." Soo-young looked at him in surprise. "Why are you doing this, Minho? You don't know me. You have no obligation to help me." Minho gave a half smile, shaking his head. "I don't know, Soo-young. Maybe it's because if I were in your position, I'd want someone to do the same for me. Besides, you deserve a chance to start over, everyone does." She looked away, clearly touched by his words, but still wary. "I don't want to get you in trouble. He's dangerous, and people who get involved with me usually end up hurt." Minho leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on hers. "Let me take care of this. I'm not the type to run away from trouble." The coffee grew cold in their untouched cups as they stared at each other, each trying to decipher what the other really wanted. For Soo-young, this was a chance for escape that she hadn't expected, but it was also fraught with uncertainty. For Minho, this was the beginning of something he didn't fully understand yet, but felt was inevitable. "If you want, you can stay at my apartment for a while," he said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's safe and he won't find you there." Soo-young hesitated, but the desperation in her voice was undeniable. "Are you sure? Won't this complicate your life?" "My life is already complicated enough," he replied with a reassuring smile. "It won't make a difference." And so Soo-young accepted Minho's offer, not knowing that this simple gesture of kindness would open doors to dark secrets that they both still didn't know. The journey was just beginning, and the danger she was fleeing from was closer than either of them could imagine. The drive to Minho's apartment was silent, but not uncomfortable. Soo-young watched the city pass by through the car window, thoughts swirling in her mind. She was relieved, but the feeling of danger still haunted her. Minho, on the other hand, kept his hands firmly on the steering wheel, focused, but every now and then he would cast discreet glances at her, as if to reassure her that everything would be okay. When they arrived, Soo-young was greeted by a welcoming but simple environment that suggested Minho didn't spend much time there. The walls were a neutral white, and the minimal decor revealed a practical and unattached personality. The grey couch in the center of the room, the wooden dining table, and the few paintings on the walls contributed to an organized but impersonal environment. "It's simple, but I hope you'll find it comfortable," Minho said, opening the door and waving her in. Soo-young looked around, her steps hesitant as she entered the room. "It's fine, I don't need much, just a place where I can be at peace." Minho nodded. "I'll find peace here. I'll make sure of that." Soo-young, still wary, sat down on the couch, sinking into the soft upholstery. Minho grabbed some clean clothes and a towel, draping them over the arm of the couch. "I imagine you'd like a bath. The bathroom is over there on the right. I'll fix you something to eat in the meantime." She looked at him in surprise. "Minho, I don't know how to thank you for this. I can't pay you back." He smiled, a sincere, reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it right now. Just take care of yourself." Soo-young stood up slowly, gathering the clothes he'd left for her. "Thank you," she murmured, before disappearing down the hallway toward the bathroom. Minho watched her walk away, feeling a mix of protectiveness and curiosity. There was something about Soo-young that intrigued him, an aura of vulnerability that contrasted with the quiet determination in her eyes. He knew there was more to her story than she seemed, and the feeling that she hadn't told him everything yet nagged at him. But he wouldn't push her, not yet. While Soo-young showered, Minho moved around the kitchen with ease, preparing a simple meal, rice, vegetables, and grilled meat. He knew she probably hadn't eaten well in days. When Soo-young returned, her hair wet and her face more relaxed from her shower, the aroma of food filled the air, and she noticed the thoughtful gesture. "You really didn't have to do this," she said, sitting down at the table. Minho placed a plate in front of her, sitting on the other side. "I told you I'd take care of you, didn't I?" She smiled, a shy but genuine smile. "Yes, you did." For a few minutes they ate in silence, and the atmosphere in the apartment seemed to finally relax. Soo-young allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to feel safe, albeit temporarily. But as the comfortable silence settled in, something began to weigh on her mind. She knew Minho deserved to know more. After all, he was risking a lot by helping her. She put her fork down and sighed deeply. "Minho, I need to tell you more about what's going on. You deserve to know." Minho looked up, intent. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. But if it helps you feel safer, I'm here to listen." Soo-young hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts before she began. "The man I was running from, he's more dangerous than I let on. He's not just someone who controls other people's lives. He's involved in much bigger things." Minho leaned forward, interested. "Bigger how?" She lowered her voice as if she was still afraid someone might hear. "He has connections to powerful people. People you wouldn't imagine. And I got too involved before I realized what I was getting myself into. I thought I was in love, but by the time I realized what he was really up to, it was too late to get away without being noticed." Minho frowned, taking in the gravity of the situation. "You mean organized crime?" Soo-young nodded slightly, not saying anything else. The answer was clear. He took a deep breath, trying to process everything. This was much more serious than he had imagined, and now he understood the reason for the constant fear he saw in her eyes. But at the same time, it only reinforced his resolve to protect her. "So he's chasing you because you know too much?" Minho asked, trying to piece it together. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know things that could destroy him and others like him, and they know it. That's why I'll never be completely safe, unless something changes." Silence fell over them again, but this time it was heavier, filled with secrets and imminent danger. Minho knew that by getting involved, he was putting his own life at risk. But something inside him kept him from backing down. "I said I'd take care of you, Soo-young," he repeated firmly, "and that won't change." Soo-young looked at him, surprised by his determination, but also relieved that she was finally not alone in this battle. Maybe with Minho by her side, there was a chance to escape this nightmare. After Soo-young's revelation, the atmosphere in Minho's apartment grew more tense. They both knew they were dealing with something much bigger than either of them could handle alone. But instead of backing down, Minho decided to stand firm by her side. However, for him, there were still many unanswered questions, and Soo-young knew it was time to tell him more about her past, even if it meant reliving painful memories. Minho took the dishes to the sink, and Soo-young remained seated, her eyes fixed on a fixed point at the table. Her mind flashed back to the times when her life seemed normal, before she fell into the clutches of a man who turned her into a key piece of something much darker. "I used to be happy, you know," she began, her voice soft but full of melancholy. "I had a simple life, nothing extraordinary, but it was the life I chose, until I met him, Seo-jin." Minho came back and sat across from her, attentive. He knew this was an important moment, an opportunity to better understand what was really going on. "Seo-jin," he repeated, as if trying to memorize the name. "Is that how it all started?" Soo-young nodded. Yes, we met at a business event. He was charming, engaging, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say to make you feel special. At the time I was enchanted, dazzled by his world, a world of power, money, influential people, and I fell into his trap. She paused, her eyes shining with memory. I thought I was in love. He treated me like I was the only person important in his life. I didn't know that behind that smile was a man involved in dirty dealings, who used the people around him as pawns in a dangerous game. Minho remained silent, letting her continue at her own pace. I worked for him for almost 2 years, she continued, her voice taking on a darker tone. At first, it was simple tasks. He said I was helping him with his business, that he trusted me, but little by little things started to change. He started asking me to do things that didn't seem right, discreet requests that I couldn't discuss with anyone. That's when I knew he wasn't just any businessman. Minho leaned forward, trying to understand better. What kind of requests? Soo-young took a deep breath, knowing this was the critical point of the conversation. I started delivering documents to people. It seemed harmless, but later I found out they were contracts, money laundering schemes, and even connections to the criminal underworld. By the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late. I was in the middle of it all. He knew I already knew too much, and I started to feel that something was wrong. Is that when you tried to run away? Minho asked, guessing how things were going to unfold. She nodded again, her eyes now fixed on his. Yes, I tried to leave, but Seojin isn't the kind of person who just lets someone walk away from him. He threatened me, said he knew where my family lived, that he could ruin my life if I tried to escape. I knew he meant it. Soo-young shivered slightly as she remembered Seojin's threatening tone. Kurt still echoed in her mind, as if he were lurking in every shadow. But I was foolish enough to believe I could escape him. I planned everything in secret. For months, I saved up as much money as I could, and when I finally tried to leave, he found out. I've been on the run ever since. He has people everywhere, and every time I think I'm safe, they find me. Minho rubbed his chin, taking it all in. Soo-young's story was far more dangerous than he had initially imagined. Seojin wasn't just a jealous man, he was a criminal who would do anything to protect his interests. Minho knew that by getting involved with Soo-young, he was also putting himself in the spotlight. Do you think he already knows you're here with me? Minho asked, unafraid but aware of the gravity of the situation. It's possible, she answered honestly. If he has people watching the city, it won't take long for them to find clues. But you didn't have to get involved in this, Minho. I don't want to put your life at risk. Minho shook his head. I chose to help you, and I'll stay by your side until the end, no matter what the danger. Soo-young was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. Still, she knew that things were going to get much more complicated from there. Now that you know everything, she said, her tone serious, we need to figure out how to get out of this. Seojin won't stop until she finds me. Minho nodded, his gaze resolute. We'll find a way, but first, we need to figure out how he's been tracking you. Soo-young frowned. Do you think he's tracking me somehow? Minho glanced at her phone, which was on the table. Maybe he might have placed a tracker on your phone or something you carry. We need to be careful from now on. He stood up and took her phone, turning it off immediately. Soo-young looked at him in surprise, but nodded. You're right, she said. We need to hide better. The decision was made. They would investigate, plan their next steps, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation that was to come. The atmosphere in Minho's apartment was thick with tension, but at the same time, there was a new sense of purpose. Soo-young and Minho knew that the only way to free themselves from Seojin's shadow was to act quickly and with precision. They both began to form a plan, but the urgency of the situation made it all the more complicated. Soo-young, we need to know what Seojin is up to right now, Minho said as he paced the small room. If we have an idea of what he's planning, we can get ahead of it. She nodded, already thinking of the possibilities. The only way to find out would be to contact someone who's still at his company, someone who can give us information without knowing who we are. Minho stopped and looked at her. Do you have anyone in mind? Maybe Hyunwoo, Soo-young replied with a glimmer of hope. He was my co-worker, and he's always been loyal. If I can talk to him privately, he might have some valuable information. Great. But we need to do this carefully. Seo-jin might be monitoring company communications, Min-ho warned, and Soo-young's expression turned serious. I know, that's why we should use a secure channel. I have an old email address we use to discuss personal matters. It's unlikely he's monitoring this, Soo-young suggested. Perfect. Let's prepare a message. But first, we need a safe place to do it, Min-ho replied, looking out the window as if he were waiting for an enemy to appear. There's a discreet cafe a few blocks away out of sight. We can meet there and make the communication, Soo-young suggested. She was already feeling a little more excited about the possibility of doing something proactive. The two quickly got ready and left the apartment, trying to remain calm as they made their way to the cafe. Min-ho couldn't help but notice that Soo-young's expression reflected a mix of determination and anxiety. He knew that every step they were taking was a risk, but she seemed determined to face her past head-on. The cafe was small and cozy, with tables arranged in strategic corners, allowing customers to talk without being easily overheard. Once they arrived, Min-ho chose a table near the window, while Soo-young sat with her back to the door so they could better observe the surroundings. Now let's write the message for Hyunwoo, Min-ho said, as Soo-young took out her laptop. She logged into her old account and began typing. Hi Hyunwoo, I hope you're okay. I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I'm in a bit of a bind and I need your help. If you can, please respond quickly. It's really important. Soo-young hesitated as she sent the message, nervous about how Hyunwoo would react. The cafe was relatively empty, and the barista was distracted by other customers. Min-ho leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Soo-young. Once he responds, we need to prepare for any eventuality. Seo-jin might find out we're in touch, he said, and Soo-young nodded, knowing the tension was just beginning. A few minutes passed, and Soo-young began to feel uneasy. What happens if he doesn't respond? He will. If you were close, he'll worry, Min-ho said, trying to reassure her. But the anxiety was palpable. Finally, an alert sounded from the laptop, making them both jump. Soo-young immediately opened the message. Her heart raced as she read Hyunwoo's reply. Hi Soo-young. Sure. Let's talk. Where are you? Relief flooded Soo-young's body, but it was quickly followed by concern. He wants to know where I am. What should I say? She asked, her voice tense. Tell him you're at a cafe near the park and that you can meet him soon. But do it in a way that doesn't seem awkward, Min-ho suggested, aware of the fragility of the situation. Soo-young quickly typed out the reply, keeping her tone casual, and sent it. The tension was almost unbearable as they waited for Hyunwoo's next reply. He might take some time to reply, right? Soo-young asked, trying to convince herself. Yes, but the sooner we can meet, the better, Min-ho replied. Minutes passed, and finally the notification arrived again. I'm on my way. Where exactly? Soo-young and Min-ho exchanged nervous glances. He's coming, Soo-young murmured, relieved but also apprehensive. We need to act fast. As soon as he arrives, explain the situation. But be careful. Seo-jin might have informants everywhere, Min-ho warned, his tone serious. The cafe remained quiet, but the tension grew as the clock ticked down. Soo-young glanced out the window anxiously. What if he doesn't understand? What if he warns Seo-jin? We need to trust him. He was your friend before all this, and I hope that loyalty still exists, Min-ho replied, trying to remain calm. A moment later, the door to the cafe opened and a man walked in. It was Hyunwoo with a worried look on his face. He spotted Soo-young and quickly approached. Soo-young! He exclaimed, worried, as he sat down at the table. What's going on? Soo-young took a deep breath, deep down, knowing it was now or never. Hyunwoo, I need your help. I'm in danger, and Seo-jin is after me. Hyunwoo's gaze immediately turned serious. Seo-jin? What did he do? The conversation that followed was crucial. With every word, Soo-young shared her story, while Min-ho watched intently, ready for anything. It was a race against time, and they were about to find out if they could shake off the shadow that loomed over them, or if the past would catch up with them once and for all. The atmosphere in the cafe grew thick as Soo-young shared her story. Hyunwoo listened intently, his eyes wide as the details of his fight with Seo-jin unfolded. The tension was palpable, and a sense of urgency hung in the air. Seo-jin. I knew he was doing wrong, but I never imagined it would come to this, Hyunwoo said, concern evident in his voice. "But you have to be careful. He won't hesitate to do anything to protect his interests." Minho nodded, his expression serious. "We need information about Seojin's next steps. What is he planning? What is his next move?" Hyunwoo hesitated for a moment, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "I don't know much, but there are rumors that he is planning a big deal. Something that will involve a lot of people and could have serious consequences. If he succeeds, he will be impossible to stop." "A big deal," Soo-young repeated, her mind racing. "Do you know who he is?" "Yes, he is trying to close a deal with an international conglomerate. If that happens, his influence will only increase, and you will be in even more danger," Hyunwoo explained, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We need to know more about this," Minho said determinedly. "If we know when and where this meeting will be, we can try to gather evidence against him." Hyunwoo frowned. "This won't be easy. Seojin is very careful about your movements. I can try to get information, but it will take time and a plan. I don't want you to put yourself at risk." So-young looked at Minho, her mind racing. "What if we can find a location where he is? Could we make a recording, maybe? Something that proves what he's doing?" "It's risky, but it could work," Minho agreed. "We need to find a way to infiltrate this meeting without him noticing." Hyunwoo looked at them, a mix of fear and determination in his eyes. "I'll do what I can. I'll keep in touch with you, So-young, and as soon as I have any information, I'll let you know. But you need to stay out of sight. The last thing we need is for Seojin to find out we're investigating." "Thank you, Hyunwoo. You have no idea how much this means to us," So-young said. A weight lifted from her shoulders. The three of them talked for a few more minutes, discussing the details of the plan and how they would stay in touch. Meanwhile, the clock continued to tick, and the pressure only increased. What had once seemed like a challenge turned into a race against time, with danger growing ever closer. When they finally said goodbye, Minho and So-young left the cafe and walked down a quiet path, their thoughts still reeling from their intense conversation. "Do you think we can really do it?" So-young asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "If we do it together and are careful, yes, I believe we can," Minho replied determinedly. "We've already faced so much. We can't give up now." But as they walked away from the cafe, So-young couldn't help but feel like the weight of the past was always lurking, ready to attack her at any moment. The idea that Seojin might always be one step ahead was distressing. Night fell, and the two decided to return to Minho's apartment, where they could plan their next steps more calmly. However, before they could feel safe, So-young's phone vibrated. It was a message from Hyunwoo. "I'm in danger. Seojin knows I've been in contact with you. We need to meet immediately." The color drained from So-young's face as she read the message, fear gripping her heart. "Minho, he found out! What are we going to do?" "We need to get out of here now," Minho exclaimed, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We can't risk being discovered. Let's hide somewhere safe until we can figure out what to do." The two of them ran through the streets, trying to stay calm, but the feeling of being chased was almost unbearable. Minho thought quickly, "There's an old inn near the park where we can stay. Let's go there." As soon as they reached the inn, anxiety took hold of them again. As they settled into their room, So-young couldn't get the image of Hyunwoo out of her mind. What if something happens to him? He was just trying to get us to leave. "We'll do our best to protect everyone. Once we have a plan, we can try to rescue Hyunwoo if necessary," Minho said, his voice steady, though inside he was worried. They'd spent the night awake, planning how they could find out more about Seojin and what he was up to. But with every second that passed, the feeling that danger was getting closer and closer only grew. The clock was ticking, and the battle for their freedom was only just beginning. The first light of morning filtered through the heavy curtains of the inn, but sleep never visited So-young and Minho's eyes. Ever since they'd gone into hiding, their minds had been racing, thinking about what to do next. Hyunwoo's message was still echoing in their heads, bringing a growing sense of urgency. "We need to act fast. Seojin is going to go after Hyunwoo," Minho stated, frowning as he examined a map of the city spread out on the table. "He mentioned something about a big contract. We can use it to our advantage." "Yes, but how? We need information that Seojin doesn't want us to know," So-young replied, anxiety taking over her. What if we can infiltrate the business meeting? Minho suggested, his expression brightening at the idea. We can pose as assistants or journalists. If we can record everything, we'll have the proof we need. That's too risky, Soo-young said, biting her lip. What if they find out it's just us? We have to take the risk. We can't let Hyunwoo pay for our hesitation. He trusted us, Minho stated, his voice thick with determination. With that, they began to plan their approach. Minho did some quick research on the event and, with a bit of luck, they managed to find the location of the meeting, a luxurious hotel in the city, frequented by renowned businessmen. We'll need appropriate attire. We can't stand out, Minho said. They decided to go to a nearby clothing rental shop where they could transform into anyone. As they walked there, Soo-young couldn't stop thinking about Hyunwoo and the consequences that could come if they failed. After renting clothes that suited the formal setting of the event, the two prepared themselves with a little makeup and a neater haircut. There, now we look like two professional assistants, Minho commented, checking himself in the mirror. Soo-young smiled nervously. I hope we get lucky, and that Hyunwoo is safe wherever he is. With their disguises ready, they set off towards the hotel. The tension grew with each step. When they reached the entrance, the hotel lobby was opulent, with crystals sparkling in chandeliers and a grand spiral staircase in the background. Well-dressed people milled about, some chatting in small groups while others headed to conference rooms. Minho grabbed Soo-young's hand and gently pulled her towards the registration desk. Come on, we have to get a pass. The receptionist watched them, frowning. Do you have a conference ID? Oh, sure, my name is on the list of attendees, Minho replied quickly, trying to maintain his composure. We're here to help with the event. Here's our business card, he improvised, handing over a card he had quickly made. One moment, please, the receptionist said, typing furiously on the computer. An uneasy silence fell as Soo-young and Minho exchanged nervous glances. Finally, the receptionist looked at them with a forced smile. Here are your credentials. Have a great day. Once they received their credentials, Minho and Soo-young stepped away from the counter, unable to believe their luck. We made it, Soo-young muttered in relief. Now we need to find out where Seo-jin is, Minho said, eyeing the signs indicating the different conference rooms. Let's take a look at the schedule. They made their way to a room with a sign that said Business Meeting Executives. Soo-young felt her heart race. What if he's there? That's where we need to be, Minho replied confidently. We just need a moment. Let's mingle. When they entered the room was filled with men and women in formal attire. A speaker stood on the stage, but Soo-young's attention was fixed on the back of the room, where Seo-jin was talking to a group of people. There he is, Soo-young whispered to Minho, her voice thick with nervousness. We need to position ourselves so we can hear everything. Minho nodded, and they moved closer, trying to appear natural, as if they were part of the event. Seo-jin was in the middle of an animated conversation, gesturing as she talked about the contract. Seo-jin said with a triumphant smile, No one can stop me, and with this I will be able to eliminate anyone who gets in my way. Soo-young felt a chill run down her spine. He's more dangerous than I thought, she murmured to Minho, who squeezed her hand in support. We need evidence, Minho said, pulling a small recorder from his pocket. I'm going to turn this on and try to capture everything. His pulse racing. Minho pressed the record button as they moved closer, trying to catch every word. The conversation grew more and more intense, and Soo-young's heart seemed to beat in tune with the rising tension in the air. Their future depended on this moment. The atmosphere was electric and the tension was almost palpable. But as they watched Seo-jin and his group, a warning bell rang in Soo-young's mind. What could possibly go wrong? If they were discovered, everything they had done so far would be at risk. The air in the room was thick with the promise of an uncertain future. Soo-young and Minho could hardly believe they were so close to Seo-jin, but adrenaline kept them focused. The recorder ran silently in her hand, capturing every word, every treacherous plan that Seo-jin revealed to his associates. The contracts are already in place. Tonight I'll secure the final signature, Seo-jin said, smiling like a cat that's just caught a canary. That way all the power will be in my hands, and Hyunwoo, well, he'll just be a memory. Soo-young felt a surge of anger and helplessness. Seo-jin's words cut like a knife. He really has no idea what's coming, she muttered to Minho, who looked at her with concern. We need to get out of here with this information. Once we have it all recorded, we can take it to the authorities, Minho replied, his eyes fixed on Seojin. Stay calm. We're close. But as they concentrated on catching every word, Soo-young noticed something unusual. A man in a dark suit who had been standing apart from the conversation began moving toward them. He looked different, with a menacing aura and a fixed gaze on his face. We need to change positions, Soo-young whispered, tugging on Minho's arm. They slipped away from the group discreetly, but not before the man in the suit noticed them. Hey, you two, he shouted, his sharp voice echoing in the room full of people. Soo-young's heart raced, and she turned to Minho, her eyes wide with terror. What are we going to do? For God's sake, just pretend we're here as assistants, Minho replied, trying to remain calm, but his voice betrayed his anxiety. Soo-young watched as the man approached, his face impassive. You shouldn't be here. What are you doing in a private meeting? He asked, crossing his arms with a menacing look. We're just helping, Minho said quickly, his voice shaking. A mistake. We must be in the wrong room. The man frowned, and for a brief moment Soo-young felt like the tension might explode. But instead of making a scene, the man looked at them with an appraising gaze, then gestured with his hand. Follow me, he said, leading them into the hotel hallway. Soo-young's heart was racing. What was he going to do with them? The tension grew as they were led away from the conference room, each step like a distant echo of an uncertain future. Finally, the man stopped in front of a heavy wooden door and opened it, gesturing for them to enter. Come in, he ordered. Reluctantly, Soo-young and Minho exchanged a glance before stepping into the room. The man followed, closing the door behind him. What were you doing in there? He asked again, his voice low and menacing. We're here to help with the logistics of the event, Minho replied, trying to maintain his composure, but his voice sounded fragile. That's all. The man looked at them, and for a moment Soo-young felt like he might expose them at any moment. But then a look of understanding dawned on his face. You're not involved with him, are you? Seojin is not someone to be trifled with, he said, his voice softer. Soo-young hesitated, but something inside her urged her to speak. He's planning something terrible. You don't know what he's doing, she said, the sincerity in her words shining through. Hyunwoo is in danger. We need proof to stop him. The man looked surprised. Do you care about Hyunwoo? The question echoed in the room, and both young men nodded, the tension beginning to dissipate. If you really want to help, you should tell me what you heard, he said, leaning against the table. Seojin mustn't know I'm here. He might destroy me if he finds out. Minho and Soo-young shared what they had heard, detailing Seojin's plans, while the man listened intently. If you're telling the truth, he was about to close. If everything goes as planned, I'll have control over the market. We might have a chance, he said, his expression changing from anger to determination. But we need to act fast. We need the recording. Soo-young pulled out the recorder and handed it to the man, who examined it with a serious look. If this is authentic, we can use it against Seojin, he said, pressing the button to play the recording. As Seojin's words echoed through the room, the man began to formulate a plan. We need to present this to a trusted lawyer, and then to the police. We can't let Seojin sign that contract. That will be the end of it. The tension that had previously filled the room now turned to hope. We can do this, right? Soo-young asked, a flame of determination starting to ignite in her chest. Yes, but we still have to stay under the radar, the man said, his tone serious. Seojin must be preparing for the final meeting. We don't have much time. With adrenaline pumping through their veins, Soo-young and Minho knew the battle was far from over, but now they had a chance. And with that, they were ready to fight. The clock on the wall seemed to have stopped, time ticking slowly, as the man who introduced himself as Jun spoke his plan. Soo-young and Minho were on high alert, taking in every word, every detail that could be the key to saving Hyunwoo. We need to act fast, Jun said, looking out the window at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering. Seojin has a meeting scheduled for tonight. He intends to seal Hyunwoo's fate. We need to stop that from happening. Minho took the lead. What can we do to help? Where can we find the lawyer you mentioned? He's in an office a few blocks away, Jun replied, his gaze determined. But we can't afford to be seen by Seojin or his men. They have eyes everywhere. I see, Soo-young said, her heart racing. Let's act like we're hotel staff, like we did before. It's the best way to avoid suspicion. Exactly. But before we leave, we need to decide who will take the recording, Jun said, his expression grave. If something happens, the plan can't fail. Soo-young hesitated. I can take it. Minho can be our backup in case we need a quick exit. And besides, I know the lawyer. I've worked with him on other projects. I might be able to convince him to help us. Jun nodded, looking satisfied. Good. Then let's get ready. We need disguises so we don't draw attention. The meeting should start in a few hours. The three of them moved quickly, changing their clothes into hotel staff uniforms that Jun had in a backpack. Soo-young looked in the mirror, feeling different, as if her new identity had empowered her. She was no longer just an observer, but a fighter in the heart of the battle. Once they were ready, Jun led the way, with Soo-young and Minho following close behind. The atmosphere outside the room was tense, with the realization that at any moment they might be caught. The lights in the hotel were shining brightly, but to them everything seemed dark. As they walked through the lobby, Soo-young couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. She glanced back, but saw nothing that raised suspicion. We're on our way to the lawyer's office, right? She murmured, her voice low. Yeah, just keep your composure, Jun replied. The last thing we need is an unexpected encounter with Seojin. The walk to the office seemed endless. With every corner they turned, Soo-young felt a mix of anxiety and determination. When they finally arrived, Jun knocked on the office door, and a middle-aged man with a serious expression answered. Jun, the lawyer said, recognizing him immediately. What are you doing here? It's not safe. We need to talk, and quickly. It's about Seojin, Jun said as he pushed open the door and gestured for them to enter. Soo-young and Minho followed, closing the door behind them. Once they were inside, Soo-young handed over the recording. He's about to sign a contract that could ruin everything. We need your help to stop it. The lawyer stared at the recording, his eyes widening at Seojin's words. This is serious, he said, his tone changing immediately. Seojin mustn't know you're here. We need to be discreet. What do you need me to do? Take this to the authorities. We need to act before he finalizes the deal, Jun replied, his expression tense. Fine. I'll contact someone I trust. But you need to hide. If Seojin finds out you're involved, he won't hesitate to do something terrible. The lawyer said, his voice low and urgent. Minho turned to Soo-young, his gaze filled with determination. We can't go back until we know for sure that Hyunwoo is safe. We need a contingency plan. I'll coordinate everything with the authorities and keep you guys updated. As soon as I have news, I'll be in touch, the lawyer said, his gaze focused. But please be careful. You have no idea what Seojin is capable of. Soo-young felt a rush of emotion mixed with fear. The last thing I want to do is put you at risk, but we need your help. Hyunwoo, he's all we've got. So stay in touch. Don't expose yourselves any more than necessary. The situation is about to get a lot more dangerous, the lawyer said, his expression serious. Before they could respond, he hurriedly left through the back door while Soo-young and Minho looked at each other, the reality of what they were facing starting to sink in. Time was running out, and the pressure was mounting. We have to find a way to dismantle Seojin's plan before it's too late, Minho said, determination in his voice. Yes, and we'll do it together, Soo-young replied, clenching her fist. Nothing will stop us from saving Hyunwoo. With that, they prepared for the next step, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. The atmosphere was heavy as Soo-young and Minho hid in a dark corner of the hallway, away from the prying eyes of Seojin and his men. The lawyer had walked away, but they couldn't wait any longer. The clock was ticking down to the meeting that could decide Hyunwoo's fate. We need to act now, Minho whispered, his gaze unwavering. Seojin can't have the chance to finalize that contract. Soo-young nodded, her heart pounding. I won't let him do that to Hyunwoo. What do you suggest? We need a distraction, something that will get his attention long enough for us to enter the room where the meeting will take place, Minho suggested, his mind working on a plan. What if I pose as an employee? I can go in, and you can keep an eye on the outside, ready for anything, Soo-young said, her mind lighting up at the idea. I can use the uniform we have, and if necessary, create a situation that will draw his attention. It's risky, but it could work. You have to be convincing, Minho warned, but the determination in his eyes showed he was willing to take the risk. Soo-young took a deep breath, knowing what was at stake. I'll do it. Stay alert and let me know if anything seems off. With one last knowing look, Soo-young adjusted her uniform and prepared for the mission. Minho positioned himself, hiding in the shadows as she walked toward the conference room. Her heart was pounding, but her determination overcame her fear. As she approached the door, Soo-young took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened and one of Seo-jin's assistants greeted her with a curious look. What do you want? I'm a new employee. I need to deliver important documents to Mr. Seo-jin, she replied, her voice firm. The assistant hesitated, but the urgency in her expression convinced him to let her in. Inside the room, Seo-jin was surrounded by several associates, his presence imposing. He turned, his eyes immediately settling on Soo-young. Who are you? A new assistant. I'm here to deliver these documents, she said, lifting a folder from under her arm. It's urgent. Leave these here. We don't have time for games, Seo-jin replied, but her insistence was palpable. Actually, Mr. Seo-jin, these documents contain crucial information about the contract you're about to sign, Soo-young said, trying to remain calm. It's about the company's security. Seo-jin frowned, doubt flashing through her eyes. Show me. At that moment, Soo-young had an insight. Actually, it would be best to discuss this behind closed doors, away from prying ears, she suggested, her mind racing. If you could give me a moment, I can make sure you have everything you need. The associates exchanged confused glances, but Seo-jin's authority silenced them all. Very well. Come with me. He gestured for her to follow him into a smaller room. Soo-young barely contained her adrenaline as they walked through the door. Once inside, the tension was palpable. Now, what do you have to tell me? Seo-jin asked, her gaze piercing. There's something you need to know about the contract and the implications it may have, Soo-young began, her voice firm. Hyun-woo is directly involved, and his safety is at risk. Seo-jin smirked, crossing her arms. Do you think you can intimidate me with this conversation? He's just a piece on my board. Not really. He's the heart of what you're trying to build, she insisted, forcing herself to remain confident. If you keep going, you could lose more than you realize. Seo-jin's face darkened and she realized she was throwing everything away. You think I care about a single life? All that matters is power. That's what you think. But what you don't understand is that there are people willing to fight to protect you. You may be powerful, but that doesn't mean you're immune to the consequences, Soo-young replied, the intensity in her voice growing. Just then, Minho appeared behind the door and the surprise on Seo-jin's face quickly turned to anger. What are you doing here? He shouted, his tone sharp. I told you I wouldn't let you hurt Hyun-woo, Seo-jin, Minho declared, advancing toward them. The tension rose and Soo-young realized the situation was about to explode. Minho, wait! She shouted, but it was too late. Seo-jin turned quickly, drawing a gun. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Soo-young lunged forward, trying to disarm Seo-jin before he could fire. The fight was fierce, every move carrying the urgency to save not only Hyun-woo but also their own lives. The room became a battlefield as emotions boiled and screams echoed. Minho joined the fight, and together they tried to take down Seo-jin before he could do something irreversible. The conflict brought them to a breaking point, where everyone's fate hung in the balance. Soo-young felt the adrenaline coursing through her body as she fought, determined to protect the ones she loved and to stop the darkness from taking over their lives. The battle in the room intensified. Every blow and every move revealed not only the fight for their lives, but also Soo-young and Minho's determination to protect what they loved most. Tension hung in the air, and adrenaline pulsed through their veins as they faced off against Seo-jin, whose rage was as unpredictable as his ambition. But what would happen after this confrontation? Could they defeat Seo-jin and save Hyun-woo from a dark fate? The consequences of this fight would not only be physical, they would shape each of their futures, revealing secrets that could change everything they knew. And as the fight unfolded, new challenges would arise. So-young and Minho would find themselves in a world where alliances were fragile and true intentions were not always clear. What else was at stake? And what did it really mean to fight for what you love? If you want to find out how this story unfolds and what happens next, be sure to subscribe to our channel, leave a like if you were moved by this journey, and share this video with friends and family who also need to know this story. We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments, telling us where you speak from and watch our videos. Your voice is important to us, and to not miss the next chapter of this exciting saga, stay tuned. A special link will appear on the screen, taking you to a video that promises to help even more on your personal journey. Click and find out what comes next. So-young and Minho's story is far from over, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching and see you next time.